Okay. I'm Joanne Kellerman.
I'm Leon Kellerman.
We live on St. Mark's Square. We came here at the end of 1974, and this was, we got married and got the house, and so we've been here 44 years now. And so we were looking for a house in Center City. I thought I'd like to live in Center City. And then that turned out to be impractical and hopeless. So we didn't even know where University City was. We saw an ad and we came out here and looked. There was a real estate man, George Funderburg, who was promoting the neighborhood. And we looked at the house that he advertised, and then he took us in his car all over the neighborhood, and he was driving by each house, like name dropping about all the interesting and important people that lived in each house. And he more or less sold us on the neighborhood.
The size of it was number one, and the fact that it was almost intact and almost looked like how it was in 1879. However, the person who lived before was a tenant because his house was owned by the
Divinity
School,
oh, wow.
which was and he was one of the professors, and he did a lot of awful stuff, which we had to get rid of. And everything was painted flat white. And there were ugly, horrible, ugly shelves on every wall of this particular room. The fireplace, we didn't even know we had a fireplace on the second floor, and that had to be destroyed. He planted over the fireplace. And he put hardwood floors over the original pine, which was, we had to get rid of that. We got rid of a lot of things before we actually moved in, including the wallpaper.
But at that time, the University City didn't have the greatest reputation. A lot of people consider it dangerous, and we were kind of worried about that. So we walked down the street. We walked down the street, and the next door neighbor, Dorothy Gillum, was sitting on her porch, and we said, well, how's the neighborhood? And she said, well, it doesn't matter because St. Mark's Square is special. One time, right after we moved in, there was some kind of a fundraiser. I think it was for the Arts League, and it was on one of the new high-rise dorms at Penn. And then we met a man that owned the big complex between Locust and Walnut on 40th Street, and he also owned Smokey Joe's. And when we told him that we'd bought a house here, he just was completely dumbfounded. He moved into this neighborhood, and he owned property here, but he lived on the main line somewhere. Well, I think a lot of people that lived here were sort of like, I don't know if you pioneer types, that they were trying to improve the neighborhood and promote things. In fact, I think the reason that the house tours started was to encourage people to move into this neighborhood. Because the house tours, the Historical Society had, they featured different houses and showed what could be done. No, a couple of people had Kelly Green. And there's no written rule, but it just seems like everybody that moves in now asks every old-timers what color what the color is, so everyone gets it. But if somebody wanted to paint the house purple, you know, the porch, they could. Well, a lot of things have been done to them. A few are the same. There was one house that had the complete walls taken down between the living room and dining room. And some people don't have all their doors. And I think our doors might have come from another house where somebody tore things down. But I think only about 2 people still have the back stairway. And a couple of people have put on additions on the back to make a larger kitchen. Well, they needed...
But a storage unit out of it.
Yeah.
Or they had their washer and dryer there. So they got rid of the back stairs. We restored the back stairs.
Well, it was always there. We just took
okay.
there was a door on it and it was a closet. And I think most people, if they want a bigger kitchen, they would, the architects tell them your back stair has to go or something. Yeah. And we tried to put everything back the way it was. We didn't have a closet in the stair. There's a closet under the stairs in the hall, and that had been taken off, and there was a washer and dryer that were vented into the cellar. That we tried to put the closet back to match the house next door, you know, like the original. And then some people have extra doors in their basement. If you need a door a certain size, we got a door to fit. Well, one person that I was thinking of was Ruth MALLOY, who lived about 3 houses down. And I didn't know, I hadn't heard about her, but she apparently was well known around town. But when we first came, I noticed this house and it had hubcaps all over the front. And then I thought, well, maybe some hippie type people live there. And then when I met Ruth and her husband Joe, I couldn't believe it. They had white hair. And they turned out to be really interesting people. And I think Joe was like Leon's best friend on the block. And he was the book expert at Freeman's. He was a librarian at the Inquirer before that. And Ruth had her own thing. She did a lot of writing, and she was active as in the Penn alumni organization, and also her fraternity. She graduated from Penn, I think, when she was like 18 or something. And we found them really interesting. She got to be my really best friend here, I think, when she was 90. Well, the University City Historical Society was trying to promote the woodlands for several years. And so they had a thing where if you donated, I think if you donated, she donated $1,000 with the idea that she could have her party after her funeral at the Woodlands. And then they didn't want people in the building. That they said it was an insurance problem or something was a problem. So then she decided she didn't want to wait till her funeral. She wanted to have a party when she was 90. So so they said, well, you can't have it in the Woodlands, but we can get a tent for you and you can have it outside. And this was in July. So there was she invited about 300 people, and it was a big production. All her relatives came. Some came from South America, Georgia, all over the place. And it was such a big production that she ended up going to the hospital the night before because the excitement was too much. And the tent turned out to be two little of those little things that they put over the graves after they've dug the graves. And somebody pasted "Happy Birthday" over where it said Sunset Memorial Park. But it was a memorable occasion, right? Well, we have a St. Mark's Day every year. I think originally it started on St. Mark's Day in the church calendar, which is in April. And somebody that was connected with the divinity school probably organized that. But since we've been here, it's usually in June, the first weekend in June, because the weather's better. So it changes from year to year, but we have it the same weekend. And the streets, now we're closing the block for 2 days. And we have the whole street for breakfast on our porch. And we have a whole program from start to finish. Well, when we first came, there were only there weren't too many children. There may have been like 7 or 8 children. Every time, most of the time, the families ended up moving to the suburbs when it was time for school. But since the school, the Penn Alexander School has been built here, we've had as many as 38 children at a time. I'm not sure how many we have now. Well, they merged with another school in Massachusetts, and it must have been in '74 is when we came. There were 6. Everybody was pretty upset that there were 6 houses on the open market. No, the other residents all at once, and ours was the last one. I don't know when the first one started, but maybe it must have been around '73 or '4 when they moved. Oh, that was another attraction, yeah. It was a big bargain.
Yeah. I offered,
Well, they were asking.
what were they asking?
They were asking $35,000.
And I offered 32. And they took the offer.
And then he was worried that he paid too much.
Yeah.
It's been a good investment. No, we're the oldest.
I think no.
We're the oldest ones.
I think not.
Yeah, we have seniority now. And I think we're really lucky. We have great neighbors.
Yeah, well, it says many conveniences where we live. Public transportation, 2 supermarkets. We're between 2 supermarkets.
Well, it's a lot safer and cleaner than it was when we came here. There used to be a lot of trash floating around on Walnut Street, and since I think Judith Roden helped a lot, they had a program where they paid for part of us, everyone getting lighting, like a lamp out front, and then there's a security guard on the corner. If we come home late at night, we can stop there and they'll watch us get into our house, and then we can call for an escort if somebody lives a couple of blocks away or they want to go to the bus stop. No, that's another improvement. I mean, for us it's an improvement. That was a house with refugees living there, from I guess Vietnam and Cambodia, and they were living there, and then a bus would come and take them out to do you know, picking vegetables and fruit and for day labor kind of thing. But the house was in horrible condition, the restaurant school. So they have really, they're great neighbors. And they own several houses. You know, they own the 2 houses next to it and the 2 houses across the street. Well, there's certainly a lot more interesting restaurants around here now.
Oh, yeah.
I think the whole neighborhood has really changed a lot. Yeah. When we first came, the Inquirer never missed a chance to put in some derogatory thing about the neighborhood, and now they're calling it a trendy neighborhood. Well, there was a Greek restaurant on Baltimore Avenue that's long gone, and that was about the only one. The Gold Standard, when the Gold Standard opened, that was a big thing. They opened in a former Chinese laundry out here, and that original one was called the Gold Standard. So everybody was fairly enthused about that because it was like a real interesting restaurant. A lot of people were like suspicious or opposed to the, especially when they wanted to get rid of the library on 40th Street. They wanted that land, and then they wanted to give the library a space in the building where Fresh Grocer is now, and the neighborhood got really upset. So they said that there was that the library would cost too much to rehabilitate. And then a committee formed, and they had their own evaluation done. And the price was much lower. And then people in the neighborhood I guess the Friends of the Library was organized. Friends of, is it Friends of 40th Street? So then they found out it was a Carnegie library, and they couldn't tear it down anyway. So it got saved, but it was a close call. Ruth and Joe had a house on Locust Street where one of the high-rise dorms is now. So that's why they moved here, because their house was torn down. And they were nice big houses. You know. So I think that, well, at least our impression of Penn improved with all the recent things they were doing to help the neighborhood. Also, they were telling the new faculty members and employees, like, you don't want to live in this neighborhood. You should move to the main line. And that was, you know, that wasn't, didn't help, you know, our opinion. but then now they're like more promoting it more.
Period.
No, well, she had lived out here, so I understand she wanted to help promote the neighborhood. That's when we got our light lamp out front, because we only had to pay a certain amount, and so everybody got a lamp. And that's when we got the security guards. We had a friend that visited us that had gone to law school at Penn, and we were driving around the neighborhood, and he couldn't believe how much better Clark Park looked. Like when he lived here, there were weeds, knee-high weeds, and he said, and it was dangerous. But when he was a student, he just left class, went to his apartment and shut the door and locked it. It was a little dangerous. Like we actually were held up at gunpoint on our front porch. I was mugged twice. Once at the corner. Somebody followed me home from the grocery store at 6 o'clock at night, knocked me down.
Wow.
Yeah. I think things have really improved. The neighbors were always great. I think in the neighborhood itself there's some diversity, like maybe not as much on this block, but I think probably most of them were connected with Penn, at least when we first came.
Yeah.
And I think like maybe the difference now is they might need a little more money to get the house. I don't know. I think most of them were professional. There might have been a couple of blue-collar workers here when we first came, but I don't think we have any now.
I don't.
He only celebrates the food.
But I do. Well, since my parents were Orthodox, they kept strictly kosher. And they observed, of course, all the important holidays, of course. And when I was a kid, I had to go to synagogue for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. That's the two major Jewish holidays. So that was the extent of my, also on Bar Mitzvah. I wasn't really religious. My father would go to synagogue only during the high holidays. And I broke all the rules by marrying her.
So I go to St. Mary's, the Episcopal Church on the campus, 39th and Locust. Yeah, he does sometimes.
Only to hear the organ play. And I have a lot of, the organ is not in great shape yet. They're trying to restore it. And it's costing a lot of money to restore it.
The diversity here, like we have a few Jewish families, and probably the rest might be Christian, but probably a lot of them don't observe anything. Well, I came from Hatboro. Well, I moved there when I was 3. So it was a small town, about 5,000 people, and I was there from kindergarten to graduating from high school. So I think it was quite different. It wasn't city, you know. We walked to school, but you probably needed a car to go anywhere. And here, like, the children would be playing on the sidewalks. Maybe they learn how to use public transportation.
Well, I was born and raised in South Philadelphia, and I always wanted to live where the other Jewish neighborhoods were. So when we first moved out, my mother had died when I was 15. So after that, my father, my sister, and myself moved out of South Philadelphia and we went to Logan, and I lived there for quite a while. And after Logan, my father had died, and I moved to, where did we Oh, Strawberry, before my father died, right before he died, we moved to Strawberry Mansion. And that's what, then my father went to a nursing home, and I stayed in Logan. And that's when I met Joanne. I met Joanne over a broken elbow. I was her patient at Einstein after being treated for surgery at Jefferson. And standing in the door of the room was Joanne. I said, "Oh, Joanne." I didn't know, I didn't talk to her at all, of course. I didn't know who she was. And I was her patient. And you can go on from there if you want. I was the credit manager for many years. And I started with a company that was lending money to businesses based on their accounts receivable, which most banks would not touch in those days. Anyway, I got several jobs, many more jobs after that, different jobs. And the last job I had was with a Jewish exponent. It was always told my father, can we move to West Philadelphia? Because I heard that was the place to be. I never made it. Until now.
Pretty soon after we moved here, the Callahans, Gordon and Louise Callahan, lived at the corner of this block, and Gordon Callahan and Joe Malosnik were two of the people that were involved in all the organizations, like the Arts League and Historical Society, and they were sort of traded back and forth being president and things like that. So they were doing a house tour, and somehow I got on the committee for that. And when we did house tours, then we used to have like a whole lot of people, not just one or two setting it up. So somebody was in charge of hostesses, somebody was in charge of getting the houses, doing the program, etc., etc. So I think I was in charge of doing the program twice, and Leon went with me. He was supposed to be taking pictures of the houses. I don't know what that was for. Was that for the program? Anyway, so I wrote all the descriptions for the house. You know, I interviewed the people and wrote all the descriptions. And then I was involved with it for several years. I was the president once. And then I was the secretary, and I did the newsletter for a few years. Wasn't as nice as now. We didn't have a computer then either. And then I stopped doing it because I was involved with my mother who needed my help. Then I got back on the board again about 20 years ago. Something like that.